Thank you very much, Professor Sipokle. My name is Narendra Rustagi. I'm a professor and director in the of Center for Global Business Studies in the School of Business at Howard University. We have four panelists, and so I would introduce the panelists, and then Professor Maru Etta would provide the structure and moderate the session, and Professor Anita Schmied, she would moderate the questions and monitor the chat room. In the panelists, we have Professor Bhagwati Prakash Sharma. He is Vice-Chancellor of Gautam Buddha University in Greater Noida in India. As an expert, he has participated in ministerial meetings of several WTO conferences. He has been invited by the Indian Parliamentary Standing Committees on WTO and on transport, tourism, and culture to make presentations. He has lectured and given keynote addresses in several countries on universal humanism of Swami Vivekananda and yoga. He has authored 14 books, has supervised several doctoral research scholars and research projects, and he has published over 250 articles and research papers. Next is Ambassador Mathilde Mukantabana. She is a Rwandan politician and politician and diplomat born in Butare, Rwanda. She is currently working as the Rwanda's ambassador to the US and non-resident ambassador to Mexico, Brazil, and Argentina. She is the president and co-founder of the non-profit Friends of Rwanda Association. Next, we have Dr. Doug Berry. He is Senior Director of Communications and Publications at the US-China Business Council. Before joining USCBC, Doug worked in the private sector as a strategic communications consultant, assisting clients in industries including healthcare, data, analytics, and higher education. Doug was the Director of Marketing, Communications, and Strategic Partnership at the US Foreign and Commercial Service, where he helped position and promote an agency of the Department of Commerce with offices worldwide and more than 2,000 employees. He also served as an acting foreign commercial officer in Singapore, Hong Kong, and Thailand. While a faculty member at the University of Alaska, he was director of the Alaska Center for International Business and the American-Russian Center, which he had USAID contracts to do small business development in the Russian Far East. Next is Ms. Jahnabi Phookan. She is the 37th National President of FICCI Flow, that is a female leadership organization of the Federation of Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industries. She is passionate about women's empowerment and strongly advocates and tirelessly works towards building sustainable livelihoods for women's economic upliftment. She is an entrepreneur and co-founder of 2 National Tourism Award-winning companies. Her companies are in travel and tourism, long-distance river cruising, hospitality, tea and textiles. All of these touch women's lives and livelihoods. She was the founder, vice chairperson of FICCI Flow Northeast chapter in 2007. So with this, I would request Professor Maru Etta to lay out the ground rules and host the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rustagi, and welcome to our distinguished panel, Professor Bhagwati, Ambassador Mukantabana, Dr. Barry, and Ms. Phookan. We will take about 5 to 10 minutes for you to just give us some insights on what we'll be discussing today. So just some opening remarks, up to 10 minutes each, 5 to 10 minutes, that's good. And then after that, we'll open it up to questions. And so let's begin, and Professor Anita Schmied will moderate the questions that are coming from the panel, not from the panel, rather from the participants. So let's get started with Professor Bhagwati.
Thank you. Her Excellency Ambassador of Rwanda, Professor Narendra Rustagi, and esteemed delegates in this panel, as well as the viewers in this webinar. Indeed, when we compare the various continents, today Africa comprises population almost equal to the 50 countries of Europe and 26 countries of Latin America, and is overflushed with the natural resources. But Africa is having hardly 3% share in the world trade, and at the same time, the manufacturing value addition is also very low. Just I would like to quote the example of China. In 1980s, the per capita income of China was almost 15 to 20% less than India. And today it is 5 times India. Just why? Because China has enhanced its share of manufacturing value addition. If we see the overall global manufacturing shares, we see China holds almost 28.4% share in world manufacturing. Second position is of United States with 17.5% share in world manufacturing. Third place is of Japan with 10% share in world manufacturing, while Japan has only 1.6% of global population. And fourth place is of Germany, between 6 to 7%. So out of a polity of more than 210 nations, 4 countries are holding almost 60% of global manufacturing. And now Africa, which is overflushed with resources, has a per capita income just $1,800 to $2,000, while if we compare the per capita income of Europe, it is almost 15 times more than that. And so unless manufacturing and whatever growth we see or observe in the Africa, it's without jobs and without manufacturing value addition. So unless Africa develops some way of converting its own raw materials into value-added products, maybe intermediates or maybe finished products. When Africa is holding almost 90% of world's cobalt, and today when we are moving towards the electric vehicles, and for lithium batteries, cobalt is much needed raw material, and world cannot move to battery-driven vehicles without the supply of cobalt from Africa, or likewise in lithium-ion batteries, it is the lithium, or even when we see almost 98% of the gold is in Africa. So unless Africa develops some consortium, I think it would be very difficult. But if African nations develop some industry consortiums to have some value addition outfits, even for that case, even the African companies have to go for acquisition abroad strategy to acquire some manufacturing facilities to get access to the technology, then also it won't be a costly affair. Just let me quote another example from China itself. When China established its Lenovo, it was with 2,40,000 yuan. And even up to 2005, the turnover of Lenovo was hardly $30 million. But then they acquired the personal computers division of IBM in US. They acquired the personal computers division of NEC in Japan, and they went for many acquisitions. And ultimately, today, Lenovo is the largest personal computer manufacturing company, and they have developed this conglomerate just by acquiring technology-bearing companies across the world. So at present, if Africa has to deliver quality living standards to its vast population, almost more than 120 million or more than 127 million people, then jobs have to be created in manufacturing. That is number one. Another thing is, if Africa has to raise its share in the trade, otherwise what has happened, large number of Chinese companies or other foreign companies have acquired the mineral resources, and now there are only branch transfers from one branch in Africa to another branch in Europe, Asia, or America, or elsewhere. So unless there are price negotiated trading activities, Africa cannot aspire to add desired value in its gross value addition per annum. So it may be a very challenging position. But in this regard, I would like to quote an example of Europe, where when Europe was not having any wide-bodied aircraft, all wide-bodied aircraft manufacturers were in US, like Boeing or Lockheed Martin or all these companies. So 4 European countries came together: UK, France, Germany, and Spain. And they established Airbus consortium. And they were having only small, tiny, petty, pygmy aerospace spare part manufacturing units. They brought all of them together to form an industry consortium called the Airbus Consortium. And then they divided roles and responsibilities among various tiny aerospace spare part manufacturers, that which component would be manufactured by which company situated in which country. So all these aerospace spare part manufacturers from across 4 countries of Europe came together, and they came up with the Airbus. And for many years, Airbus was only a consortium. Now it is a corporation. So no doubt, Airbus example is a very advanced example. But to begin with, African countries which are having common raw materials, they must develop some manufacturing facilities with a consortium approach. And what do I feel? That the global multilateral agencies should also support these countries and their corporates to do some kind of value addition. Otherwise, whether if we compare the difference between the per capita income of various countries in 1835, when there were no sunrise technologies, when there were no such technological cleavages, and whatever goods that were being traded or sold or were consumed by in each country were being manufactured or were being produced, or all kind of value addition in the raw materials, whether agriculture produce or minerals, it was being done by domestic ventures. And therefore, the difference between the highest per capita income and lowest per capita income among all the nations of the world was only to the tune of 1:3. Today, it is 1:400. It is just because some countries are having all the value-added activities or value addition activities, and other countries are just producing the raw materials. So I think most of the raw materials we do see, they are in Africa or developing countries of Asia or developing countries of Latin America or elsewhere. And most of the manufacturing facilities, whether in the developing countries or in the advanced countries, they are owned by the corporates of advanced nations. So what has happened? Today, raw materials are being supplied by countries of Africa. Manpower is also being supplied by them, but the ownership of the ventures is with the foreign entities. So I think unless Africa builds some good corporates And even for that, as I have already mentioned, they can go for consortium approach. And to begin with, at one day, unless they start value adding to their raw materials and produce goods for African nations as well as for the outside world, we cannot think of elevating the standard of living. Now, today, most of the poor people are in Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa, having less than $1.25 of income. China, which is most populous country in the world, is having the largest share of a middle class just because it could generate enough quality employment for its people by having manufacturing facilities, and they are supplying goods to every country. Even in these last 2 months, January and February, Chinese trade has increased by 60% just because China is the factory for the world. So somewhere we have to think of bringing justice, and to bring this justice and to elevate the standard of living and to enhance the participation of Africa in global trade and manufacturing, some bold initiatives have to be taken. So I think I'm finishing with my time. So I have started with a different plane. How does it appeal to all the people? I can't say. But somewhere the people in Africa have to take this initiative of setting up their own enterprises. Even initially, they may produce very substandard products. But out of that manufacturing experience only, they would be in a position to produce the latest and advanced products. So somewhere they have to make this beginning. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Bhagwati. Now we'll go on to the Ambassador Mukantabana. Your opening remarks, please.
Hello?
And you need to unmute yourself.
Yeah. Hello, Professor Etta. There is a change of plan because of her time constraint. Okay. She would just, we have time for a couple of questions, so I'll just ask her the questions.
Okay.
And so first is President Kagame has said China relates to Africa as an equal. And your government has praised China's model of state-led growth. As the United States continues to refine her policies towards Africa in general and towards China in Africa in particular, what are the key messages you want to deliver? What are the roles of Africans and African governments in shaping foreign engagement across the continent? And secondly, what is the significance of AFC-FTA for trade relations between the US and Africa? Thank you.
Thank you so much. And, thank you for inviting me to be part of this amazing conference. And I also appreciate Professor Sharma presentation because I took notes. And I wish I could ask a couple of questions because some of the presentation really touch, the heart of the Mara in Africa and the development model. But I'm going to try to respond. Thank you, Professor Rustagi. Rwanda continues to engage development partners by promoting a partnership model, which views the countries involved equally and on their own merit, whether it's the United States, whether it's China, whether it's India, whether it's Japan. We're also aiming to support the country vision. So for us, we treat partnerships both on bilateral and multilateral basis, based upon what kind of relationships we have. So it's not adversarial in the way we do our business. But most of it, Rwanda is trying to support our Vision 2020 and 2050 and the National Transformation Strategy that we started in 2017 and go into 2024 towards development and inclusive growth. So the one thing I can, maybe what resonates is that Rwanda has always put forward the importance of public institutions, state institutions, creating a healthy business climate for private investments to take place. This has happened through public-private partnership, which mobilizes resources that will be very difficult to bring together separately. And through business climate reforms, and Rwanda has performed rather well in that field. In 2019, Rwanda was ranked 29th in the World Bank Doing Business report, with notable progress in different indicators, like quality of credit, information systems and procedures, ease of starting a business. We can start a business within 6 hours and online, but also resolving insolvency, fighting against corruption. All these things are ranked very high in Rwanda. If I can speak a little bit about Africa, African governments have a primary role in shaping foreign engagement on the continent, especially through closer coordination within the foundational institutions such as the African Union and the regional economic communities, whose role is to pave the way for a more integrated continent. And this is where Professor Sharma, what he was talking about, ours didn't come by design. You know that the Berlin Conference divided us in very small countries that can't really perform in the situation we are in. But so the foundational institutions, the African Union, regional economic communities, have a role of paving the way for a more integrated continent. And this is through wide-scale programs designed in the AU Agenda 2063. That is the integration agenda of the entire continent. The African Continental Free Trade Area, the African Union Protocol on the Free Movement of People, or AU Peace and Security Architecture, where we have already started to raise a fund with AU Peace Fund, now having almost a high representative with Donald Kaberuka, a board of trustees to oversee the fund use, and currently reaching almost $120 million. And the goal is to reach, I think, 400 million by 2021. So I can say that African governments have continued to discuss reinforcing strategic objectives to provide a mutually beneficial framework to guide the US-Africa trade and investment relation. This would therefore assist in many different ways. First, maximizing the remaining years of the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, strengthening commercial cooperation, and developing short-term solutions to reduce barriers to trade investment. And those are many, if you are talking about the United States vis-a-vis Africa. Africa is also increasingly speaking with one voice and promoting an integrated view of Africa development in important fields such as trade, the economy, peace and security, and is indispensable to effectively and efficiently shape foreign engagement on the continent. You also asked me to talk a little bit briefly about the US African Continental Free Trade, and I'm going to give a brief a little bit. It started with the whole Africa journey toward an integrated and prosperous continent that gained momentum with the entry into force of the agreement establishing the African Continental Free Trade Area on March 21st, 2018, and it actually took place in Kigali, Rwanda. The achievement of this important milestone was historic because it really marked the third stage of the roadmap, setting the treaty establishing the African Economic Community of 1991, also known as the Abuja Treaty, that was made in Nigeria. The African Continental Free Trade has been touted as an economic and globalization game changer because it has the potential, really big potential to transform African economies and significantly raise Africa's share of global trade to position the region as an increasingly dynamic force in international arena. And I can add a few points maybe on this. Number one, the significance of the African free trade cannot really be overstated. It will be the world's largest free trade area since the establishment of the World Trade Organization in 1994. it also definitely brought us closer to the Africa we want. That's the slogan that we have adopted for 2063, the Africa we want. What do we want to build? So it's going to bring us closer to that. And it's within the aspiration shared by many African nations. It will give also opportunities to countries like Rwanda, like my country, that has set up the right environment for trade and investment to attract significant FDI, to become hubs of startups, and to expand to bigger markets. And we have started in earnest. When we look, for instance, if I can give an example, our airline, Rwanda, is flying in many African capitals. It used to be almost 4 days to go from Rwanda to Senegal, the same continent, because we had to go through Europe and then go back to West Africa. So you can imagine, for instance, now once the door is open, it has started in earnest, modestly, but we are going that way. I can say that also that the African free trade will contribute to US prosperity by offering unique opportunities for expansion of US businesses, contributing to job creation in the United States, and it will create a vast market for US goods and services, and also is shaping a certain harmonized policy of regulatory regime, meaning that the same rules will be implemented on the continental level, reducing the cost of transaction. And surprisingly, most of the US corporation and trade actors already are doing business with Africa. Who are doing business with Africa have also shown interest in the implementation of the African continental free trade. The last thing maybe I'll talk about is the African free trade offers a unique opportunity to US to empower Africa, to drive its own growth, while also advancing mutual prosperity through trade, investment, for the benefit of both continents, Africa and the United States. And finally, since we are in the Women's Month, maybe I can say that within the African free trade, women stand to gain big time. The African free trade area clearly focuses on improving the lives of women. There is a risk that some of the economic gains made by women through trade could be reversed by the COVID-19 crisis. And according to the Economic Commission for Africa, women account for about 70% of informal traders in Africa. Through such work, women can be vulnerable to harassment, violence, confiscation of goods, and even imprisonment. Tariff reductions under the African free trade will enable informal women traders to operate through formal channels, bringing better protection. And furthermore, a growing manufacturing sector would provide new jobs opportunities, especially for women. The African Free Trade Area Secretary General Amkele Mene stated, it will be, talking about African Free Trade Area, the opportunity to close the gender income gap and the opportunity for small, medium enterprises to access new markets. This is significant since small and medium-sized enterprises account for 90% of jobs in Africa. So for me, I'm leaving it here, but I'm very much interested in hearing what other people are going to say. Thank you again for making me part of this incredible business. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Mathilde. We'll now get Dr. Barry to give his opening remarks.
Wonderful, thank you. And let me say that it's so wonderful to see Ambassador with us today. She's a good friend, and we've had the opportunity of many meetings and working together. And for sure, if the audience is interested in success stories, they should definitely look at Rwanda as one of the most important ones in these current times taking place in Africa. And even though it's a landlocked country, it still has great dynamism in its entrepreneurial class and in its government. And it has risen in all of those indicators that were mentioned before in terms of ease of doing business, openness, rule of law, and the capabilities of its workforce. So, and I think the ambassador is absolutely correct. Some of the problems in Africa now are at the root of it is the colonial past, when the colonial powers created infrastructure that was to their benefit, which has mostly been moving raw materials out of the continent and back to Europe. And so the railways and roadways were, distorted in a way that left the continent at a huge disadvantage, and it is still laboring under those problems. But fortunately, it's beginning to turn the corner, as the ambassador pointed out. And at the root of it, at the heart of it, is the importance of working together within the continent itself. Africa is a very different place, a very diverse place. We in the West tend to look at it through, different kinds of lenses. And a lot of it is from the standpoint of ignorance. We simply do not have the understanding of the complexities and the variety that is in the rich cultures that exist there. So just this morning, I was looking at my news feed, and there was absolutely nothing about Africa, not a single story. It was all China, it was COVID, vaccinations in Germany. But if you really wanted to learn something today about what's going on in Africa, you would be hard pressed to know anything. So we in the West have to improve our understanding of what's happening there, and that ought to be top of mind. So the second point, and I don't want to go on for very long because I want to get to the questions, is that both China and the United States seem to agree on one thing. They disagree on a lot of things, but they do agree that their power should be used to create public goods wherever the public exists, and because they are the one and two economic powers in the world with tremendous technological capabilities, tremendous resources of all kinds, it is really incumbent upon both of them to play a larger role in the equitable development of Africa and other developing parts of the world. They say that this is what they want to do, but there does at the moment seem to be entirely too much finger pointing and fist shaking and arguments about all kinds of things. And we've not really focused on the importance of equitable development throughout the rest of the world. And this goes along with things that we have articulated together already, and that is working together to face existential threats to humankind. And they include climate change and public health. In particular, the spread of viral diseases that we are only all too familiar with in the last year. So I would add to those things that we can cooperate on, to cooperate on international development with a focus on Africa. And related to that point is that here is a perfect time for African countries to take advantage of the superpower rivalry. Everyone wants to have influence in Africa, either to access the market, to access the raw materials, to access a place that's going to be the future, an important market in the future. It's an important market now, it'll be more so in the future. Large, young population, all kinds of things that make marketers salivate. And so what I think Africa could and needs to do is play off China and the United States, one from the other, take advantage of the situation that's occurring now. Everyone wants access, everyone wants influence. So now is the time to drive hard bargains with people who want to invest there and have influence there. And to make sure and to demand on the part of both the United States and China that the best and highest standards of environmental protection, of labor rights, of transparency, of fairness, all of those things should apply, and African countries should demand that the contributing countries, those that are interested in investing, will follow those highest possible standards to eliminate corruption and other kinds of damaging behavior that we have seen from larger powers in Africa's past. So, so that's one thing. The other, of course, is to build up the international organizations to make sure that there's plenty of capital that's available without undue strings attached, and to make sure that the funds are available, the capital is available to invest in the African countries. The third part, of course, has to do with Africa itself, but it also has to do with the international community. And that is, and Ambassador rightly pointed out, that the role of women is absolutely important. Here you have over 50% of the population on the continent that you're not taking full advantage of in terms of their entrepreneurial capabilities. So the problems that bedevil women on the continent and other places as well, even here in the United States, opportunity and the lack of it. So the other important pillar of this is public health. Women's health, reproductive health has to be top of mind, and the opportunities for access to good health care, extremely important. Also access to education, basic fundamental education has to be at the top of the list of people who are passionate about improving the situation on the continent and helping Africa develop to its full potential. So access to technology, of course, is also important. There's an absence of high-speed internet on the continent. That has to be changed. Now there's technologies that can actually leapfrog the copper wires that sort of bedeviled us in the past. Now you can, and Microsoft and others have this technology where balloons can be floated over the continent that can actually create the connectivity that is needed to plug in people in rural areas especially, and give them an opportunity. As Professor Bhagwati said earlier, the access to small manufacturing is very important, but with 3D printing now, it's possible to set up fairly sophisticated manufacturing ventures, even in the smallest and most rural places. We've seen some examples of this, but hopefully we'll see very more. And then the other is intra-Africa trade. Again, the ambassador pointed how important it is for Africa to lower the barriers to trading within the continent itself. This is extremely important, even within countries. I worked for the Cote d'Ivoirian government a few years ago, and I did a report and was absolutely shocked to find that, taking a truckload of cocoa, which is a very important commodity in that part of the world, to the port where it can then be shipped to France to be turned into French chocolates. The French chocolate should be turned into French chocolates in Cote d'Ivoire, not in Paris or its suburbs. But the problem is getting that truck to the port costs much more than it should because of road tolls within Cote d'Ivoire itself, lack of technology at the port that slowed things down to the point where costs mounted, lack of training on the part of customs people, and frankly, also corruption. People, looking at every, few hundred kilometers for a payout, and by the time that truck gets to the port, it's incredibly expensive. So those kinds of logistical matters can and should be addressed, must be addressed, and I think that we'll see that going forward. So all of those things taken together suggest a roadmap for developed countries and their interest in doing business on the continent and doing good on the continent, and an agenda for within Africa. But certainly China and the United States should and must play a very important role in doing that, and hopefully they will, but not by themselves. We must press them and encourage them to do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Barry. We move on now to opening remarks from Ms. Phookan. Your opening remarks, please.
Namaste from India. Thank you very much for having me on this dialogue today, Ambassador and eminent panelists with me to talk on the impressions of trade and its potential for us within India and Africa. I would like to say that the relations between our two countries have long historical roots. For many centuries, the peoples of our two parts of the world have interacted at levels of economics, politics, and socio-cultural practices. And historically, even in economic terms, there was the trade between our countries. And apart from the individual Indian traders who began operating in Africa during the colonial period, in post-colonial era, Indian companies have opened and operated successful businesses in your continent. Now the ties today are being reinvigorated by our Prime Minister, Narendra Modi ji. Last year, he set down India's engagement with Africa under the 10 guiding principles, which focused on industry, information technology, education, health, agriculture, security, and intelligence cooperation, and finally, financial inclusion. This has allowed India to boost its economic development and national security, and at the same time, allowing India to maintain the economic and political ties with the African states. This has been essential for the infrastructural and economic development of most African countries through both the Indian government loans and grants which were given out through the Special Commonwealth Africa Assistance Program. Current statistics, it seems to indicate that India is now Africa's third largest trading partner. We're accounting for over 7% of Africa's trade output, which is calculated at over $70 billion. Africa has been the source of India's demands for oil, gold, ores, and gas, among other items. There have been various multinational companies of Indian and African origin, which operate in these two countries. And as the technological changes have ensued, many of these now operate in the areas of IT, farm machinery, transportation. A number of Indian sector firms have established themselves in the continent with going on to engineering, motor vehicles, financial services, construction, telecommunications, healthcare, and pharmaceuticals. There have also been a number of collaborations. For example, the private healthcare and communications companies have worked with the state actors to implement the Pan-African E-Network. This was launched 10 years ago, with the aim of the project was to bridge the digital divide between African countries and India through electronic information and technology. It was part of an education and health support initiative conceived by India. This Pan-African E-Network has since been relaunched as the E-Vidya Bharati and E-Arogya Bharati Network Project. This project connects doctors and educators in Africa with the Indian counterparts. And India is also a major supplier of the generic drugs to the continent. The majority of Africans living with HIV and AIDS have been treated with affordable generic antiretrovirals manufactured in India. So that was, and with that, I'd also like to add here that, so that is why India's bilateral trade has grown in the last 2 decades from $7 billion to $66 billion, and still has tremendous potential for growth in the years to come. And the African continent has, needless to mention, the largely untapped scope for multilateral business opportunities due to its huge, vast abundance of natural resources. And as with your millions of untilled acres of land and large reservoirs of oil, as long as the potential to support the large percentage of the world's hydroelectric power, besides the human capital, this potential is very important from India. And as our Prime Minister had said, that Africa has 60% of the world's arable land, but produces just 10% of the global output. And he has spoken of improving Africa's agriculture, and that the partnership between India and Africa should address the challenges of the climate change as well. So to kickstart these initiatives, the India-Africa Trade Council was inaugurated on the 22nd January this year. And it is to open 13 trade offices in each of India's major metro cities, which will assist Indian businessmen and business persons who want to trade with Indian countries, with African countries, I'm sorry. So each of these trade offices in India, the 13 trade offices that I mentioned, the idea is that they will work directly with the African embassies to introduce business opportunities, particularly in our cities of Bangalore, Chennai, and Hyderabad. In fact, a recent roundtable meeting was organized by the Trade Council in Chennai, which made the decision to send a 30-member South Indian delegation in April to sign various MOUs on health, skill development, and agriculture with Botswana, Namibia, and COMESA, the COMESA, where Djibouti, Ethiopia, and Zimbabwe are member countries. India's exports to Africa are diverse, as we've discussed, and Africa's exports to India are the crude oil, gold, coal that I've just spoken about. So these two products make up 40% of the total exports to African markets, according to a 2018 analysis of African and Indian trade by the two countries' export banks. On a personal note, I'd like to mention the Small Scale Industries Corporation, the NSIC, which facilitates carrying out entrepreneurship development programs, like the setting up of the rapid incubator centers globally. NSIC has developed a unique model of rapid technology incubation for setting up new small enterprises, creating self-employment opportunities by imparting training in entrepreneurship building and skill development to unemployed persons who intend to start small enterprises or who seek employment opportunities. So these incubators, they envisage the transformation of unemployed youth to budding entrepreneur. And NSIC has set up incubator centers in Ethiopia, in Burundi, Rwanda, Egypt, Burkina Faso, Gambia, Zimbabwe, and Mozambique. My first visit to South Africa was through NSIC, which facilitates trade exchanges when they took women entrepreneurs from India for the exhibitions of arts and crafts and handloom handicrafts. So that was how my relationship with NSIC grew. And I've seen that the nano enterprises, small and micro enterprises, they are instrumental in making this connect. But now to speak on the global scenario now, when we're looking at the pandemic time upon us, we've seen the IMF has projected that it's a historic global GDP contraction of 4.4% in 2020, and with only a partial or uneven recovery expected at 5.2% this year. But across the world, it's seen the rise of populism, protectionism, nationalism was all exacerbated by COVID-19. Citizen trust in governments across the world have also eroded, creating fragility in once stable democracies. But in your country, in your continent, the African Continental Free Trade Area, CFTA, that we hope will be a game changer, which was launched on 1st of January 2021. From there, we understand that right now, as of now, Africa accounts for just 2% of global trade, and only 17% of African exports are intercontinental, compared with 59% of Asia and 68% for Europe. So the potential for transformation across Africa is truly significant. And this pact will create the largest free trade area in the world, measured by the number of countries participating. It is to connect 1.3 billion people across 55 countries with the GDP valued at $3.4 trillion, this pact seems to have come at a time when much of the world was turning away from cooperation and free trade. So cutting across red tapeism, simplifying customs procedures will accrue significant income gains, and it will also address the movement of persons, labor, competition, intellectual property. So we think that will reassure that the full implementation of this will boost Pan-African income by 7%, as is projected. And this AFCFTA, it clearly focuses on improving the lives of women. So, and as my eminent speaker has said before me, it is a fact that women have taken several steps behind in the gender gap parity, especially in COVID times. And some of the economic gains which were made by women during trade, through trade, could be reversed because of the COVID-19 crisis. As according to the Economic Commission for Africa, women account for around 70% of informal cross-border traders in Africa. So we hope that with this act in place, women will find a better place for themselves, and furthermore, a growing manufacturing sector will provide more job opportunities for women. And we hope that that will be the opportunity to close the gender income gap, and that small, medium enterprises can access new markets. And this is significant since small and medium-sized enterprises really account for 90% of the jobs in Africa. So coming from my position in India as the national president of the women's wing of FICCI, which is the Federation of Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, in the pandemic times when I took over my tenure last year, and we were working entirely on the cyberspace as we are today, we started this collaboration on trade with women of many countries to start this dialogue and to speak across cyberspace and formalize some relationships where we can take it further on trade, because that would be this would be the new way forward, to be able to work on e-commerce and the trade potential for women across the world. And this is what we called it. It was women of 7 continents, and we call it the W7 initiatives, where we envisage creating a worldwide forum for the exchange of information, experiences, visibility, connectivity among women business owners, to set the stage for opportunities and joint ventures among women business owners and budding entrepreneurs. And the idea for women across the world, if they can mentor each other and reach out to each other, that would be a new a collaboration waiting to happen. And we've had tremendous response. So with this, we are working with also the specific object to increase the demand of goods and services supplied by women entrepreneurs globally. We wish to create a platform for increasing international trade. We wish to support, initiate, and improve efforts to integrate women vendors into the global value chain. We want to build a capacity for trade support institutions to provide better services to women clients. We want to provide mentorship services, incubation and mentorship. And we want to increase the awareness of policymakers of all countries of the potential of women entrepreneurs, and to have to look at this through a structured gender lens, which the world needs today. And to raise the awareness of the related barriers which have hampered women's traditional lack of or under-participation in international trade. To date, we've had consultations with Myanmar, with Netherlands, Vietnam, Chile, Ireland, and Australia. And Ghana is next on our chart, and we hope that we can penetrate further into the vast continent. So to sum up, India and Africa, we are a region of a market of 2.5 billion people, and we have a huge potential to explore trade and investments together. And as our Prime Minister of India has said, India and Africa should work together for a just, representative, and democratic global order that has a voice and a role for the 1/3 of humanity that lives in our 2 countries and continents. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Phookan, and thank you all, the panel, for your introductory remarks. We'll go now to questions, and before my colleague, Professor Schmied, comes on, I can ask the first question. And my first question, and I think most of you have talked about this, has to deal with, the need for intra-Africa trade. And, we see the problem of logistics. I think Barry talked about that. Dr. Barry talked about that. And so my question is, what is Africa doing to address the logistics and infrastructural bottlenecks to intercontinental trade, intra-continental trade? Specifically, the ambassador can address Rwanda. Specifically, what's Rwanda doing to make it easy for merchants to get their products to the market? And what are the other countries, such as India and China and the United States, doing to make sure that they're facilitating infrastructural development in Africa?
Thank you so much. And thank you also for the presenters. I really learned a lot. We are taking notes. So for intra-African trade, as I mentioned before, maybe even just our national airline carrier is facilitating that intra-African trade. We are circulating people and goods all over Africa, something that was not done before. There are a few, I'm not saying it's just Rwanda doing it, but we have made it one of our priorities to expand to Africa by starting that. So it's facilitating already what we call the intra-African trade. We are selling our products in Africa. We are also expanding beyond Africa, but what I would say is that the priority is for African countries. We are complementary, aside from the African Free Trade Area, but also we are organized in regional blocks. You mentioned COMESA, you mentioned East African Community, you mentioned many different things. We've created the protocols, for instance, on goods, on the common ports and so on and so forth. Like, for instance, Rwanda belongs to East African Community with Tanzania, Uganda, Kenya, Burundi, and we have the tariff is similar. So we've done already that. We are moving towards what we call the political federation or confederation. But what I'm saying is already it has been done, and I think it's not a new creation, but I think now it's going more and faster than before. We've created the protocols already, organizations. So in earnest, already the intra-African trade is occurring. Obviously, there are many, challenges. You can't do intra-African trade when you still have chaotic places or wars or many different things. Silencing the guns is also part of the agenda. So because really, as we are talking about free trade area, we also have to see on the practicality of it, and that's what the whole continent is working around. So I would say that it has started. I would say that most of the problems, economic problems, many countries in Africa have encountered is because of the closed boundaries and borders. I could tell you that there was a time going to Burundi. Burundi is, we call it like it's like a twin country. We speak the same language, same ethnicities, same whatever. But to go to Burundi was more difficult than coming to United States, having a visa. So what I can tell you is that all this opening the borders is already a big beginning. And we've seen, for instance, even like DRC, I'm talking about my country. It's a 24-hour now border open, and you can imagine, for instance, the exchanges of goods in one entry point alone. It has gone like 1,000 times what we used to get before. So definitely I would leave it there. But intra-African trade is the way. There's no way you can talk about having trade with China. As you can imagine, it's below. We are trying to go at least at a 70% increase in intra-African trade, because now we are nowhere near that kind of level. So I'm saying that it's very important for us for development of the whole continent to open the borders and to start.
Thank you. Anybody else wants to respond in terms of the infrastructure and its bottleneck in the inter-Africa trade? You know, I mean, she has addressed, the ambassador has addressed the border issue. How about issues of electricity and stuff like that, sanitation?
Before I finish, before I go, also I want to mention that Rwanda is going to host the intra-African trade in September, the trade fair. So if you are interested in coming and maybe even give ideas, that would be the best time to start planning on that. Thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you. Anita, do you have any questions?
There are no questions in the chat right now, but first of all, I'd like to thank the panel, all our distinguished panelists here. It's so much fun. I have to echo something that Dr. Berry said earlier, and that is that we often lack knowledge and awareness of the African continent. And I am learning a lot here just in the short time that we've been together. So I really appreciate everyone being here and talking about the connectivity across Africa and India. And we touched a little bit on China, and that's where my question comes. China is emerging as a superpower and certainly has made influences in Africa and in India. And I want to know what you think the role of China will be in the future in those areas, in your own areas, in where do you see China going? And I heard Dr. Berry say that Africa should really think about how it negotiates with other partners. So I'm just curious where you see the role of China coming into your areas. And maybe, I don't know if the ambassador has to leave soon, so maybe we'll start there if we could.
I appreciate your question, and we see China, like many other partners, as partners, you know, and any partner, you know, sometimes when we talk about China in Africa and in many other partners, it's like an adversarial area, but for us, that's not how we see it. Of course, China is looking for Chinese interests. And if African countries are not ready to promote their own interests, when China comes, will be exploited, just like we have been exploited for 400 years. So it's up to Africans to be strong and to be ready and to be able to take any partner. But the only thing I can maybe add here is sometimes when we discuss about China and something that maybe is not seen is that sometimes they say it's a predatory type of relationship. And it has been said, so I'm not putting it in your mouth. It's true, it could be predatory, but for Africa, it's nothing new. Europe was predatory for more than 400 years. So what I'm saying is, this is why we are excited with Africa coming together and then be able to really impose our own norms. The partnership comes also us being on the table, not someone imposing their way of doing the business with us. So it will come only when African countries come together, because alone we can't do it. We have been handicapped, we have been disabled by cutting us in small pieces and bits and pieces here and there. So it's almost like reversing the Berlin Conference of 1884, when all these things happened. So China has its own interest, Europe has its own interest, but we have to be able to say Africa has their own interest. This is how we are going to be partnering with you, you know. So that's how I can maybe respond to your question.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Anyone else would like to chime in on that question? Doug, I can see you're itching to add something.
That was such a good answer. It left me speechless. But I think that's exactly right. These countries, regardless, the United States included, though I think we have more experience than anyone building international organizations and public goods since the Second World War, and we need to be true to that tradition. And the Belt and Road Initiative, of course, is China's major infrastructure project and international development focus. And you don't read so much about it these days, but I think it's still alive, although there's concern in China that a lot of that money was wasted on poorly conceived projects for which there was little or no need. And the host countries have been very critical, calling it debt diplomacy, which I think in a couple of instances it probably is. And then there have been criticisms that China is using its own labor. So it ships labor into the countries that it is supposedly assisting, and it cuts off the opportunity for local workers to have good paying jobs and to learn trades and crafts associated with this. So as a development model, it has a lot of problems. And hopefully a united Africa will be able to negotiate from a position of strength and will be able to persuade the donor countries to operate in a manner that is in the interests of Africa and its people, and not just in the interests of those that are providing the assistance. So, we haven't really seen how this is going to play out, but it's important to be very clear on the principles that the recipient countries will operate under, and it's buyer beware. Make sure that you operate from a position of strength, not of weakness.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I think we have run out of our time a little bit, and so we can close if there are no additional comments.
You have more time. You have more time. Yes, if there are some more questions. I have just one question.
Okay.
Yes, and my question is to all the members of the panel. I think you did mention how different India would be with China vis-a-vis the relationship with Africa. But can you delve a little bit more into it with regards to the approach itself? I mean, the dynamic and the relationship between the two people, the two peoples, I should say. Because in trade, there is always a dynamic between the two groups of people, and culture is involved, and compatibility and understanding of one another. So how would that be different from the dynamic that exists currently with China?
And we can have either Professor Bhagwati or Ms. Phookan. You want to address the question on that?
Yes, when we compare the role of China and the India in Africa, mostly it appears that China is struggling hard to acquire raw material security for the next 20 to 30 years. And almost they have captured most of the mining areas, almost I can say 30 to 40% of that. And even today, markets of Africa are flooded with Chinese goods. So what Africa needs support in development of manufacturing capabilities. And there has to be some close relation in supporting Africa to develop, have its own manufacturing facility. And India can transfer technology for many crucial sectors. So India and Africa can have close reciprocal relationship while when we see the role of China is confined mostly, say for example, even when we see that all the loans that were extended to Africa for Belt and Road Initiative, more than 70% of the loans have never gone to those countries, but they were directly paid to the Chinese companies which are building these projects. So even those governments do not know how much loan has been extended, whether it was the unified gauge railway track of the Kenya or at various other places. And almost about 77 countries in Asia and Africa are such nations whose governments do not know how much China has debited in their name the loan extended for Belt and Road Initiative. And therefore, whether it is the Mozambique or it is the Cambodia, everywhere, now they are trying to catch hold of precious resources, maybe coastal belts, maybe railway lines. And therefore, in the time to come, African states may face a threat of forced Chinese acquisition of the ports or other infrastructure facilities that are being built by the Chinese companies. And the interest rate that is being charged is never unimaginable. In several cases, 8 to 10% interest rate has been charged. And even those nations do not know. In international arena, hardly 2 to 3 or 4% interest rates are charged. So exorbitant interest rates are being debited, and that too is the payments are being made directly to the Chinese companies and whose accounts are also intransparent. And therefore, that way we can see that role of India in developing Africa is more transparent and more Africa-centric. While China is seeing Africa as the source of raw material. Even there are many China towns, and even the local people cannot enter those China towns. So I think the way various infrastructure facilities that would be captured by China in the time to come is a major threat. And therefore, I think African Union and all these countries should make a due diligence how these loans are being extended, how these construction projects are being undertaken, and how much loans are being given through the governments and how much are being transferred directly to the Chinese companies without a transparency. All these things have to be properly addressed.
Dr. Barry, have anything to add?
Nothing to add on that, but I wanted to share a little heartwarming story with you, if I may, for just a couple of minutes. And also, this is an opportunity to do some business matchmaking with Jahnabi, which I would be very interested in doing. And so let me show you, this is my iPhone. These two women, born in Delhi, and have come to the United States and created a business called SoPen. It's a new one. And essentially what it is, it's a company that does, let's see if I can find it. Yeah, so it makes soap for children, and they can actually draw on their hands. And so it's, what they did is, and of course it's called SoPen, S-O-A-P-E-N. They went to the Pace School of Design in New York, graduated recently, and became fast friends there, and decided to form this company in the United States, but with the idea of growing it globally. And what's interesting about it is that, they have a profit motive. Certainly they have to pay themselves and their employees, but the main reason for creating the company was to lower the incidence of childhood diseases that are transmitted, from hand to mouth in the United States, but also in other countries as well. They're being born and raised in India. They understand the child morbidity rates and so forth, many of which are preventable. And this is also true in Africa, where they're very interested in expanding their business. So these young people, and I met them through the course that I teach at George Washington University. And that's how I came into contact with them. One of my students is an intern for them doing marketing and communications. And so they're really a company that sort of, the product is secondary. What is primary is public health, especially with regard to children. And their primary focus then is the parents, particularly the mothers, because they're the ones who are going to do the purchasing. And so the outreach to them. But this is a phenomenon that I've noticed over the last 10 or more years, where companies are organizing not just for profit, and they're also going public. So they're not this company yet, it's too soon and they're too small, but they're more mature companies have taken their companies public. And there's now a law in the United States that allows corporations to form for reasons other than the benefit of their stockholders. It's the stockholders, but it's also other social purposes. And these are called B corporations, B as in boy. And so what's exciting about it is here is, cross-border potential where you have young women who are forming these companies, and men too, I'm sure, but they're doing it with humanitarian goals in mind, not just profits. So I thought it was, a terribly exciting thing. And, right now they're trying to interest hotel chains in purchasing their soap products, so they'll have them in the room when kids go back to traveling again, when the COVID is finally under control, sooner than later, hopefully. But there's a vast opportunity for them here. And I think once their marketing gets underway and they realize how great it can be. So I think, the three things: women, social consciousness, youth, India, the United States, long tradition of, developing entrepreneurs and cross-border cooperation. Extending that to the African continent, where you have role models, you have people who are going to go there with the right kind of desire to both help people improve lives and hopefully engage in some profitable commerce as well. But I think they would be perfect members for your organization, Jahnabi, and I'll be happy to connect you at some point. It would be great, and you can thank this forum for that wonderful matchmaking.
Indeed, that's very interesting, Doug. Thanks for that, because India is such a hotbed for startups, and so many ingenious ideas coming up daily and turning into unicorns. There's a brave new world out there, and now the new normal. This is the value chain we should be propagating. Like with e-commerce, India is the second largest user of e-commerce in the country, of course, in the world after China. And women in India have taken to become shepreneurs or homepreneurs. The new word is out there, the shepreneurs, because they're locked in at home, but they're doing commerce like never before. So that's one of the takeaways that we are trying to do with the COVID times.
Wonderful.
And these are interesting lessons to learn. And the world is getting closer, and we hope we can all benefit from it.
Great.
Thank you so much, Ms. Phookan. And that's in line with one of the questions that's on the chat. One of the participants said they had a memorable experience in India with women entrepreneurs, and they're wondering, is the Chamber of Commerce, or what's India doing to connect these women entrepreneurs with other markets, with other women, other markets like in, Africa and Jamaica. And so I think Doug's sharing that information and connecting you to those women, that goes along with that. But just to answer that, is the Chamber of Commerce do they have any initiatives going on to connect women entrepreneurs between the continents, Asia and Africa, and in the US?
So what I represent our women's organization. We have 8,000 members spread across 17 chapters in our country. And, we have from budding entrepreneurs to establish businesswomen as well as professionals and educators. So my hope when we started the W7 initiative was to be able to reach out to women business councils across other countries, at least start up. This was the first round that we've done. Second would be to establish the B2B network. And since we're on the new normal, it's very easy to take the next step forward. And we're trying to do business matching. Like Doug has spoken about these, our Indian young talents there with their, maybe we could do, there would be that business matching. I've been in organizations where women have been able to take franchises of each other's products in their countries. So this is how we are starting to explore. And this is how I think women business councils can maybe represent women of each countries and come forward. And we can have this loosely knit collaboration instead of getting into paperwork and legalese and bureaucraties. This is how we've at least started out and made that connect. And we've been supported by the councils of all the countries we worked in. And we look forward to all the viewers on your show today, if we can have the opportunity to take that conversation forward through your university, Howard University. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I see Beatrice, your hand is up. Beatrice from Kenya, do you want to ask your question, please? Unmute yourself.
Sorry, I did send, hi everybody, my name is Beatrice. I am joining in the call from Nairobi, and I just want to really say thank you. Thank you to all of you, quite a lot of learning and information sharing and hearing various perspectives and just really following this dialogue on, developmental partners for, Africa. So I just sent something on the chat, and my feedback really being an African and, just listening to this conversation and with a clear understanding and knowledge of what we set out clearly on the Agenda 2063. I appreciate that, we have worked with all these countries long time. India, if you look at most small businesses in Nairobi, quite a lot have, quite a lot of Indian origin, quite a lot of trade happening in Nairobi from, the Indian cities on pharmaceutical areas, leather and, clothing and textiles. Looking at China, the other side as well, quite a lot of investment in the infrastructure. I am in Nairobi, so I can tell you how the ease of, moving around Nairobi through the infrastructure that has been delivered by China, the SGR as well, which for most of us riding from Nairobi to Mombasa, we are able to enjoy the ease of the same. So from a user's perspective and a consumer's perspective, I think there is quite a lot of good in terms of what each of these developmental partners has delivered. But I still feel that there would be much good if each one of them narrowed down on maybe one particular area, which is their strength and their expertise. I know this was picked by Dr. Barry at some point when he was talking about the common good, what common good do we all bring in terms of the development that we are impacting in Africa? And I totally agree with the ambassador that was speaking. There is none of the developmental partners that is more equal than the other. For us in Africa, we consider all these as, good friends in terms of our development agenda, which we have clearly put out in the Agenda 2063. So I am not sure that any one of them will do so much in each of the areas. And I still feel that would be good if each of the development partners, rode on an area that is their expertise, one area that is their strength. We cannot purport to do everything for Africa. But as we also do this, I think it is important to listen to the African voice. What is our interest? What are our aspirations? Where do we want to go? Because you cannot take me to a road that you want me to go while I don't want to go there. Thank you.
Thank you, Beatrice. The panels want to address a concern, add to it. I know it was mostly a comment than a question.
No, I was just saying, so thanks, Marilyn Sikokle, for giving us the extra time. And we also thank all the presenters, including the ambassador, for your excellent comments, and we'll hope to stay in touch and expand this further. So thanks a lot, Barry and Professor Bhagwati, Prasad Sharma, and Jahnabi. So thanks again.
Thank you.
And awfully esteemed.
Thank you all so much. Okay, all right.
Thanks to you as well and all the members present here. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you
Bye.
Thank you all.
on the show,
Bye-bye.
and it's been very interesting and fascinating listening to all of you. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
To all those who are watching us right now, if you want to identify yourself or say anything regarding the conference, feel free to do so at this time. Otherwise, we will take a short break and go to the next panel, which will start at 1 p.m. Thank you.